Welcome back to Untold Revenge Files. Today, the story you're about to hear takes place in Briarwood, Virginia. My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 34 years old, and I'm a single mother raising the most remarkable 12-year-old girl you'll ever meet. Her name is Lily, and if you'd seen her the night my sister destroyed her in front of a room full of strangers, you'd understand why I still feel a fire in my chest every time I think about it. Let me back up. I've always been the quieter sister. Diane, my older sister by 3 years, was the sun the entire family orbited around. She was polished, articulate. She dressed in designer labels before she could even pronounce the names. Our parents, Robert and Sandra Whitmore, never hid who they preferred. Diane got piano lessons, private tutoring, European summer trips. I got hand-me-downs and a seat at the far end of the dinner table, but I never complained. Not once. When I got pregnant with Lily at 22, unmarried, still finishing community college, Diane called me an embarrassment to the family name. My parents didn't argue with her. They just stopped inviting me to holiday dinners for 2 years straight. When they finally let me back in, I was expected to be grateful. And honestly, I was. Because I wanted Lily to know her family. I wanted her to feel like she belonged somewhere. Lily is not loud. She doesn't demand attention. She's the kind of kid who sits in the corner of a room sketching dress designs in her notebook while the rest of the world shouts over each other. She taught herself to sew at 9 years old, watching tutorials on my cracked phone screen. By 12, she could construct a garment from a flat piece of fabric with more patience and precision than most adults I know. For our grandmother Eleanor's 78th birthday celebration, a lavish dinner at a rented estate hall with over 60 guests, Lily made her own dress. A navy blue A-line with hand-stitched white piping along the collar and sleeves. She spent 3 weeks on it. She'd hold it up every night before bed and ask me, "Mom, do you think Grandma Eleanor will like it?" I told her she'd love it. The night of the party, Lily looked beautiful, quietly beautiful. Her dark hair was pinned back with a simple clip, and she walked beside me like she was carrying a secret treasure. I could feel her nerves. She kept tugging at the hem, smoothing the fabric. I squeezed her hand and whispered, "You made that. Be proud." Before I tell you exactly what Diane did next, tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I'm really curious to see how far this story will travel. Diane arrived 45 minutes late, the way she always did, like the party couldn't officially begin without her. She wore a cream silk gown and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Her husband, Todd, trailed behind with their 2 sons, both in matching blazers. My parents stood up to greet them like royalty had entered. I watched from our table in the back. Lily was drawing in her notebook. I thought we'd get through the night quietly. I was wrong. Halfway through dinner, Diane spotted someone across the hall. A woman named Patricia Langford, a socialite and gallery owner Diane had been trying to impress for months. Diane strode over to our table, grabbed Lily's arm without asking, and said, "Come here, sweetheart. I want to introduce you." Lily looked at me, confused. I nodded, thinking maybe Diane was being kind for once. Maybe she was finally warming up. They walked over to Patricia's table. I couldn't hear the words at first, but then I saw it. Diane's hand landed on Lily's shoulder, and she laughed, this bright, performative laugh, and said loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "Patricia, this is my little stinky niece. She's cute, right? Don't mind the outfit. She makes her own clothes because, well, you know." She waved her hand dismissively. "Budget family." The table laughed, not a kind laugh, a pitying, uncomfortable laugh. Then Diane leaned in, like she was sharing a joke, and added, "Honestly, I keep telling my sister to at least buy the kids something decent, but she insists on these little arts and crafts projects. No future in it, but what can you do?" Lily stood frozen. I watched her shoulders fold inward, watched the light behind her eyes just go out like a candle someone pinched. She pulled away from Diane and walked back to me with her head down. She didn't cry. She just sat down and closed her notebook. That was worse than crying. I looked across the room at my parents. They were watching. My mother had her hand over her mouth, not in shock, but to hide her laughter. My father shook his head and muttered something to my mother, and they both chuckled. My stomach dropped. My throat sealed shut. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them flat against the table to stop. Lily whispered, "Can we go home, Mom?" I opened my mouth to say yes, to grab our things and disappear the way I'd always done, to swallow it and move on the way I'd trained myself to do for 34 years. But I didn't get the chance, because across the hall, a chair pushed back slowly against the marble floor, and my grandmother Eleanor, 78 years old with a steel spine and silver hair pulled into a perfect knot, stood up. I had no idea that the next 5 minutes would crack my entire family open and change everything. The room didn't go silent all at once. It happened in layers. First, the tables closest to Grandma Eleanor noticed her standing. Then, the murmur rippled outward as people turned to look. By the time Eleanor's voice cut through the chatter, every fork was down and every eye was on her. "Diane?" One word, just her name, but the way Grandma said it made the air feel thinner. Diane was still at Patricia Langford's table, still smiling, still basking. She turned slowly, her expression caught between surprise and irritation. "Yes, Grandma." "Come here, please." Diane walked over with the confidence of someone who had never once been corrected in this family. She smoothed her cream silk gown and tilted her head like she was humoring an elderly woman's request. Eleanor looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, calmly and clearly, "Tell me what you just said about your niece." Diane blinked. "What do you mean?" "You introduced Lily to that table. I heard parts of it. I'd like to hear all of it. Repeat what you said, word for word." The room was completely still. Diane laughed nervously. "Grandma, it was just a joke. I was being playful. You know how I am." "I do know how you are," Eleanor said. "That's why I'm asking you to repeat it. If it was funny, we should all hear it." Diane's smile tightened. She glanced at my parents for backup. My mother shifted uncomfortably. My father suddenly found his napkin fascinating. I called her my little niece and made a silly comment about her dress. It's not a big deal." "You called her Stinky," Eleanor said. Not loud, not angry, just factual. "You mocked the dress she made with her own hands. You told a stranger she has no future, in front of 60 people, on my birthday." Diane's face went red. "Grandma, you're blowing this out of proportion." "Am I?" Eleanor turned to my parents. "Robert, Sandra, you were laughing." "What exactly was funny?" My mother stammered. "We weren't, Eleanor. We didn't mean—" "You've been doing this for years," Eleanor interrupted, her voice still terrifyingly calm. "You've treated Claire like an afterthought since she was a child. You poured everything into Diane because she performed well for your image. And now you're letting Diane do the same thing to a 12-year-old girl who sat in my kitchen last summer and hand-stitched a hem so clean I thought it came from a machine." She paused. The silence was deafening. "I own Whitmore and Lace," Eleanor continued. Murmurs spread through the room. Some guests knew the name, a boutique fashion company Eleanor had built from nothing over 40 years, quietly successful, supplying independent designers and high-end fabric retailers across 3 states. My parents had enjoyed its financial benefits for decades. Monthly deposits, paid-off mortgages, Diane's lifestyle funded in part by Grandma's generosity. "Last month," Eleanor said, "I signed the legal documents transferring full ownership of Whitmore and Lace to a trust in Lily's name. Claire is the trustee until Lily turns 21. The room erupted in whispers. Diane's mouth fell open. "You what?" "Lily respects the craft. She studies it. She works at it. She doesn't perform for cameras or mock people who create with their hands. She is the future of what I built." Eleanor looked at Diane with something close to pity. "You are not. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone's mask fall off in real time? Have you ever seen the exact moment a person realizes the power they thought they had was never really theirs?" That's what I saw on Diane's face. My father stood up, his chair scraping the floor. "Mother, this is absurd. You can't just—" "It's done, Robert. The documents are filed. My attorney supervised every signature. And, effective immediately, the monthly financial support I've been providing to you, Sandra, and Diane is terminated." My mother gasped. Diane grabbed Todd's arm. Todd looked like he'd been slapped. "This is insane," Diane hissed. "You're giving a company to a 12-year-old because she sews? She's a child playing dress-up." Eleanor looked at me, then at Lily, who was sitting at our table with wide eyes and trembling hands. Grandma walked over, bent down, and touched the collar of Lily's navy dress. "This piping is beautifully done," she said softly. "You should be very proud." Lily's chin quivered. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she nodded. Diane stormed out. Todd followed. My parents left without looking at me. The drive home was quiet. Lily held my hand in the back seat while my friend Janelle drove. Janelle had come as my +1 and witnessed the whole thing. "Claire," Janelle said gently, "you okay?" I wasn't. I was shaking. I was relieved. I was terrified. "They're going to come after us," I whispered. Janelle glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Would you accept that from anyone else? A coworker? A stranger on the street? Someone calling your daughter stinky and worthless? Why accept it from your own sister?" She was right. I already knew the answer. That night, after Lily fell asleep clutching her notebook, I sat on the kitchen floor and cried. Not from sadness. From the weight of 34 years of silence finally breaking. I wrote a single line in my journal. "I will never let my daughter shrink to make someone else feel tall." The next morning, I woke up exhausted but strangely steady. For the first time, I didn't check my phone hoping for an apology from my family. I didn't rehearse explanations or craft peace offerings in my head. I was done performing. It was time to protect what mattered. 3 days after the party, the retaliation started. It began in the family group chat. Diane posted a long message accusing Grandma Eleanor of cognitive decline and claiming I had manipulated a confused elderly woman into rewriting legal documents. She tagged aunts, uncles, cousins. She wrote, "Claire has always been jealous of me, and now she's using Grandma's money to get back at the family. This is elder abuse." My phone lit up with messages. Some relatives asked cautious questions. Others parroted Diane's narrative without hesitation. Aunt Margot called me a snake. Uncle Dennis texted, "You should be ashamed." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I screenshot everything. Within the week, Grandma Eleanor's attorney, a woman named Rosalind Carter, who had represented Eleanor for 15 years, sent formal cease and desist letters to Diane, my parents, and 3 extended family members who had posted defamatory statements on social media. The letters confirmed that Eleanor had undergone a cognitive evaluation as part of the estate planning process, had passed with perfect marks, and that every document had been executed with full legal oversight. The accusation of elder abuse collapsed overnight, but Diane didn't stop. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning while I was at work, Diane and Todd showed up at my apartment. Lily was home with Janelle's teenage daughter, Harper, who was babysitting. According to Harper, Diane knocked on the door, said she just wanted to talk to her niece. And when Harper hesitated, Todd pushed past her into the apartment. They sat Lily down at the kitchen table. Diane held Lily's hands and said, in a voice dripping with sweetness, "Sweetheart, you know Grandma made a mistake, right? That company was supposed to help the whole family. You don't want to be the reason your grandparents lose everything, do you? You're a good girl. You can fix this." Lily didn't say a word. She just sat there, frozen, the same way she'd frozen at the party. Before they left, Todd knocked Lily's sewing machine off the table. He claimed it was an accident. The needle plate cracked, the bobbin case shattered. Lily's machine, the second-hand Singer I'd saved 4 months to buy her, was destroyed. When I got home and found Lily sitting on her bedroom floor holding the broken pieces, something inside me locked into place. Not rage, something colder, something permanent. I documented the damage. I photographed the broken machine. I recorded Lily's account of what happened and Harper's corroborating statement. Then I called Grandma Eleanor. "They came into my home," I said, my voice barely steady. "They pressured my daughter. They broke her things." Eleanor was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said, "I'll handle it." And she did. Within 48 hours, Rosalind Carter filed for emergency protective orders. Cease and desist letters became formal no-contact orders enforced through the court. Diane and Todd were legally prohibited from coming to my apartment, contacting Lily, or communicating with me outside of legal channels. Now, here's where I want to ask you something. If someone broke into your child's space, manipulated her emotions, and destroyed something she loved, would you still call that family? Or would you finally call it what it is? The months that followed were both painful and freeing. The monthly payments Eleanor had been sending to my parents and Diane stopped completely. For years, those deposits had funded Diane's lifestyle, her leased SUV, her country club membership, her boys' private school tuition. Without them, the cracks appeared fast. Diane and Todd listed their house within 4 months. My parents, who had relied on Eleanor's support to cover their mortgage, began falling behind on payments. Meanwhile, Lily received a brand new Bernina sewing machine delivered to our apartment with a handwritten note from Eleanor. For the girl who builds beauty with her hands, never stop. Lily cried when she opened it. But this time, the tears were different. She started sewing again that same afternoon. First small things, pouches and headbands. Then more ambitious projects, a quilted jacket with hand-embroidered wildflowers, a dress for Janelle's birthday with a fitted bodice and flared skirt that made Janelle gasp when she tried it on. Grandma Eleanor began inviting Lily to the Whitmore and Lace workshop on weekends. Lily learned about fabric sourcing, pattern grading, production timelines. She carried a notebook everywhere, filling it with sketches and notes in her careful handwriting. I watched my daughter come back to life. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. The way fabric holds when the stitching is strong. The smear campaign in the extended family faded. One by one, relatives stopped echoing Diane's accusations. A few even reached out quietly. My cousin Natalie sent a text that simply said, "I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner." Lily's dress at the party was gorgeous. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Knowing that Diane's perfect life was unraveling should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like something quieter, like balance, like the weight on a scale finally settling where it was supposed to be. I wondered if Diane would ever understand what she'd lost, not the money, not the company, but the people who would have loved her if she'd only let them. A year and a half passed. Lily turned 14. She was taller, steadier, and still the quietest person in any room. But the silence was different now. It wasn't the silence of a girl trying to disappear. It was the silence of someone who didn't need to be loud to be sure of herself. She had completed a junior apprenticeship program at Whitmore and Lace, learning alongside Eleanor's senior seamstress, a woman named Dorothy who had been with the company for 26 years. Dorothy told me once, privately, "That girl has hands that listen to fabric. I've trained adults who couldn't do what she does." I had settled into a new rhythm too. I'd taken a position as office manager at a small architecture firm, a job with decent hours and health insurance, and a boss who didn't make me feel small. Janelle and I had started a weekend tradition of cooking dinner together with our kids, filling our apartment with noise and warmth and the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in March, my phone rang. The caller ID said, "Mom." My mother hadn't called me in 14 months. My thumb hovered over the screen. The old instinct surged, answer quickly, be available, be agreeable, don't make them wait. I let it ring 4 times before I picked up. "Claire," my mother's voice was smaller than I remembered. "I need to talk to you." "About what?" "About your sister, about everything." She told me Diane and Todd had separated. Todd had moved out after their finances collapsed entirely. Diane was living in my parents' basement with the boys. My father's health had declined, 2 minor strokes in the past year, and they could no longer keep up with the house or the medical bills. The family that had once looked so polished and perfect was fraying at every seam. "Wow, we need help, Claire," my mother said. "Diane is struggling. The boys need stability. Your father needs care. And Eleanor won't return our calls." I closed my eyes. The old guilt pressed against my ribs like a hand trying to push me backward. "What are you asking me, Mom?" "Talk to Eleanor. Ask her to reinstate the support, or let Diane be involved in the company somehow. She could manage something, do marketing, anything. She just needs a chance." I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said, carefully, Diane had chances. She had decades of chances. She used them to mock my daughter in front of 60 people and call her stinky and worthless. She broke into my apartment and destroyed Lily's sewing machine. She tried to manipulate a 12-year-old into surrendering her future. She's still your sister, Claire. She is, and you're still my mother. But love doesn't mean access, and forgiveness doesn't mean I have to hand her the keys to my daughter's life. My mother started crying. Part of me wanted to comfort her. Part of me recognized that this was the same tactic that had worked on me for 34 years, tears that said you're being cruel when all I was being was clear. Mom, I hope Dad recovers. I genuinely do. I hope Diane finds stability for herself and the boys. But I am not able to go back to being the person who absorbs everyone's cruelty and calls it family loyalty. Diane has Todd's family. She has community resources. She has her own capability if she chooses to use it. I didn't take everything from her. I just stopped letting her take everything from me. There was a long pause. Then my mother said quietly, "You've changed." "No," I said. "I just stopped hiding." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat on my couch for a long time after that call. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt the particular ache of grieving a family that existed only in the version I'd wished for, never in reality. I grieved the mother who might have protected me, the sister who might have loved my daughter, the family dinners that might have been warm instead of performances, but grief and clarity can live in the same room. And I had learned, finally, that you can wish someone well from a distance without setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. That evening, Lily came home from Eleanor's workshop carrying a garment bag. She unzipped it at the kitchen table and pulled out a blazer she'd constructed entirely on her own. Charcoal wool, emerald green lining, hand-finished buttonholes. She held it up with this quiet, uncertain smile, the same expression she'd worn the night of the party, waiting to be told it was enough. "It's extraordinary," I said, and I meant it with everything I had. She grinned. Not the shy, flickering grin of a girl afraid to take up space. A real grin. Full and sure. Later that night, after Lily went to bed, I stood in the doorway of her room and watched her sleep. Her notebook was open on the nightstand, filled with designs I couldn't even imagine at her age. The Bernina sat on her desk, threaded and ready for tomorrow. She was going to be okay. We both were. Not because we got revenge, not because we won, but because we finally stopped letting people who didn't value us define what we were worth. So after everything you've heard, if you were standing where I am now, with your own family asking you to reopen the door they slammed in your face, would you step back inside and call it forgiveness? Or would you stand in the doorway, wish them well, and call it self-respect? I already know what I'd choose. I'm living it. And if you're out there right now, watching this, and you recognize this story because it feels like yours, I want you to hear something no one may have told you yet. You are not responsible for managing the emotions of people who refuse to manage their cruelty. Your boundaries are not punishments. Your peace is not selfish. And the people who call you cold for protecting yourself are usually the ones who benefited most from your warmth. Hold your thread, stitch your own fabric, and never ever let someone make you small so they can feel tall. And that's where Claire's story ends. But maybe yours is just beginning. If you've ever been the quiet one in a family that only rewarded the loudest voice, if you've ever watched your child be torn down by someone who was supposed to love them, if you've ever been called too sensitive for having standards, then you already know that walking away isn't weakness. It's the hardest kind of strength there is. Claire didn't get revenge. She got something better. She got peace. And Lily? She didn't need a spotlight. She just needed someone to stop dimming her light. Now I want to hear from you. Drop in the comments if you believe talent speaks louder than labels. Drop if you think Lily's handmade dress was worth more than Diane's designer gown. And drop if you've ever had to cut off family to protect your peace. If this story hit home, smash that like button so hard your phone feels it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And hit that bell so you never miss another story from Untold Revenge Files. And remember, The people who mock what you build with your own hands are usually the ones who've never built anything themselves. I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong, stay kind, and never stop stitching your own story. Peace.